Naomi Prieto. I'm the manager of engineering and design. I'm also the business sponsor for AUD and Arizona Public Service. I've been with the company for 18 years now and held various roles from engineer to project management to program manager to assisting our C-suite executives into construction, leading crews, and leading engineering teams. Now my team is what I call the production side of the house of APS. So we produce designs for our customers and for our capital portfolio. And I'm going to let Justin introduce himself.
Good morning. I'm Justin Giles. I've been with APS for a little over 22 years now total. I'm currently the business unit lead for the AUD implementation. I've done design work, customer project work, project management work. I've been the supervisor of our design center, kind of been in all things design. I oversee our design standards as well as helping support all of our design tools. So kind of was almost born and bred for working in the AUD system. But yeah, it's been fun.
My name is Mark Kessler. I am a designer. I don't have a huge background like them, but I've been working on the project about 5 years now from when second time we started. It's been fun.
Yeah, Mark is one of our key SMEs, if not the key SME on the designer front. So he kind of undersold himself a little bit there. I will talk a little bit about who APS is. So we serve 1.4 million customers in Arizona, and our service territory ranges from the border town of Douglas all the way up to the Grand Canyon, solar fields in Gila Bend, and the pines of Payson. So we are the longest serving energy provider in Arizona, and our employee base is roughly 6,000. It feels like we're growing quite a bit, and we have a lot of clean energy initiatives underway, and AUD was one of the ways to get us there, to design for tomorrow, to be able to provide more efficient designs for our customers.
Almost there.
1 second. Sorry, Pat.
Yeah.
Imagine this, yeah.
They're real pretty.
Blue screen, trees.
All right. So we're here to talk about lessons learned, and then Justin and Mark are going to go through a demo of our one line. Well, that was a big change for us, so I'll let them talk about it. But so talking about, let me just set the base for what we kind of our journey to AUD. So like Mark mentioned, we started this 5 years ago. So August of 2019 was when we started our requirements gathering phase. And originally our plan was only to integrate with GIS. And that changed. I'll talk a little bit about that later. We had to hit pause in fall of 2022 for a couple different reasons. One was Maximo came into the picture. So that's our work management, asset management system. And they were doing a complete upgrade of that system. And it started to flange up against our implementation. And then we had some budget constraints as well. We kicked off again in January of 2023 with what felt like was a brand new scope, because going into it this time, we had to integrate with not only GIS, and there was a lot of work done. We had a project that we called Conflation to upgrade our GIS system in order to get us prepared for AUD. So that was part of the original plan was all along was to integrate with GIS, but we were not planning to integrate with Maximo. And when we kicked off in January of 2023, we had to fold in that integration, which was a pretty big deal for a few different reasons. But their integration timeline or their upgrade timeline kept slipping, and it eventually caught up to ours. And so we had a whole new set of challenges, because as we were going through and redoing and starting our build, we had to configure it to integrate with Maximo, with GIS. and we were building it to a new library. Part of the Maximo project and the upgrade was to do a complete overhaul of the library, and it was to simplify it, but it felt like it made it more complicated than simplify it. So as we were going through our build in 2023, we didn't have a complete picture of what Maximo was going to look like at the end. So you can imagine how difficult it was to navigate that. And then Pat, you were right. So we started our training and deployment, so our go live mid-April, and we finished up just a couple weeks ago. So we went from mid-April to mid-August was training and deployment. So we did a phased out approach in where we had a class come through training, and once they completed their 1 week of training, we gave them access to production AUD, and our classes were max 15, and we felt like that was the best way to. We have 200 end users that we were getting this out to. I think we planned for 200. We ended up with about 180. And that included our contractors. So I did see up here, that's something that we are just starting out. So we have several what we call engineering service providers. So they're engineering contractors for us. We contract out 20 to 40% of the work, depending on what the work type. And they're partners to us. They're there with us. And so we allowed each one of the contractors to send 2 of their employees to our training, and some of them have hired our training contractor, US CAD, to go and do their training for some of their teams. So that's been really helpful. We're still trying to figure that out, but we wanted to make sure that they were coming along with us. Some of them have used it, but obviously not with our specific APS build. All right, so let me start here. So a couple of, we had quite a bit of learnings along the way, and I just heard our friends from Idaho Power talk about all the changes, all like the simultaneous system upgrades that they're doing. And one of the things that we learned was, if you can avoid it, don't do multiple system upgrades at the same time. Now, Maximo was not part of the plan. They caught up to us. The way I'll describe it is AUD felt like a sailboat compared to like the Titanic, and we had to get to the finish line at the same time. And sometimes if they were like maneuvering to a different area, we kind of would get pushed over there too. So there was times when it became really frustrating, but we managed it. We also had an AutoCAD upgrade, like I mentioned, a compatible units library upgrade, that construction specs, construction standards upgrade along the way, conflating our GIS data. And then we also had a new customer portal. So you can imagine the shock of our end users right now. They're really living it, but we're doing our best right now. We have Justin and Mark and Cody, another designer, who's like the primary support, along obviously with our IT partners. And that's one of the lessons learned. Just if you can at all, do one system at a time, and then go and upgrade. It would have been so much easier if we would have only had to integrate with GIS and get that all out. The other thing is, our compatible units catalog was in such a liquid state, for lack of a better term, when we were doing the upgrade, because they were, again, redoing the whole library, and it was as they were changing, we were configuring, and then we also had Maximo changing. So if that can be in a solid state while you're doing your configuration or you're doing an upgrade, that's also something that would probably significantly help or reduce some of the complexities. Let me see. I talked about doing multiple program releases. So we didn't come out the gate with Maximo. We staggered it. We were like 2 months out behind them, but it still followed very closely to it. One of the things that we did was road shows during our build, showing like what was coming to our end users. and some of the support that would follow the implementation. That helped with user adoption, because the more they start hearing about it, even if they can only say the acronym, right? AUD, it's out there. They know it's coming. Some of them are curious. They'll reach out and want to know a little bit more. Mark was one of those that's always been super engaged and wanting to know more and learn about the tool and help others learn about the tool. So one of the things I think that, looking back as far as the road shows and user adoption, is as you do go through those road shows, identify some super users that you can bring in. And we did to some degree, but the more you can get on board, the easier it'll be to go through your OCM and the adoption process. Anything, Justin, that you would add to the updating multiple platforms?
So the only thing that I would kind of add was, for our CUs, we weren't just updating individual CUs. We were actually completely revamping the entire catalog, taking it from a single state structure to a multi-stage structure. So we were redoing suffixes on every single CU, just redoing everything. And that's what added to the complexity. If it was just updating a couple CUs here and there, that's something we could have worked with. But the whole structure was completely redone. And that's where the complexity came in, because having to match up to this new structure that we knew nothing about, but trying to figure it out while we're building AUD made it very, very difficult.
All right, so going into the resources, so Justin was the lead pretty much throughout. At one point, he also had a team that he was supervising, and one of the lessons learned is we pulled in 5 SMEs from the business to be our testers. But really looking back, having 2 dedicated resources to help with the build and testing would have been better. Because what happens is these 5 SMEs that were helping us out are focused on production. So if they have to meet a deadline and they have to get part of a test case completed, what's gonna take priority? That deadline to get this design to the customer. So it's very difficult to get, to have those 5 SMEs come in and help with the build and help with the testing. So having dedicated resources for that time period is something that we would do if we could go back. So regular days work's always going to win over testing if they're not dedicated. And then we had 200 end users. That's where we came up with the 2. But obviously, if you have a bigger user base, you might want to add some more SMEs. Having dedicated business leads who understand all facets of the business and have that. So, for example, Justin, he understood design. He was a designer at one point. He was a customer project representative at one point. So he understood our standards. He understands our compatible units, our material. But he also has the relationship and the understanding with the IT side. And that was a really important part too. And he understood the tool. And not just the tool itself, but the behind the scenes behind the tool. So without somebody like him leading the effort, we would have, like he says, you probably need three people to replace me, is what he used to like to tell us. But that's really important, making sure that your business lead understands the design world on the business side. I talked about having the 5 SMEs across the organization. And at one point we had 10 SMEs for testing. But again, if you can avoid having them part-time and have dedicated people, even if it's like, we're going to give you a special assignment for these 5 months, that would have helped just even get answers back to SBS as we were going through the build, or constantly having to pull on them to do their part, whether it was answering a question for a build or doing a test case themselves. Yeah, so having the level of like different super users did help, so didn't have all our eggs in one basket. But again, having, even if we could have them from different areas but dedicated, would have been a pretty much more helpful. The other thing is, as we went through these 5 years, leadership changed quite a bit. Before myself, there was another sponsor who she kind of started this journey with AUD, and I came in 2022 and took it over. But between 2022 and where we're at today, we've had 3 different directors, and that's been a challenge because we've gotten plans approved as far as what it's going to look like post go live for support after the fact, and we've had to explain and justify and go through business case after business case. So if you can have your business cases ready to go and be ready to present, that was another key thing. Like everybody, as we went through these different directors, I mean, they had their idea of what looked good. They come from different walks of the utility world, so some of them have more of an operations background versus a design background. I will say, when we had a director that came from the design and engineering world, it was a lot easier because he really understood what we were up against. But having your business cases ready to go, having just like slides ready to go as far as like being able to explain what's going on, what's coming. Our IT partners definitely helped us with that, through their leadership, but it's always good to make sure that you tighten up that support on the business side. And then the other thing too, as far as resources, is identifying your IT support for configuration, for the build, and for the support beyond the build was another important thing. I will say that David Schlesinger with SBS was our PM. Sean Lehman from our IT support was our PM, and then Justin. I mean, these 3 guys were the leads, and without them, I mean, there's so many variables that came into play. Every corner that we turned, we could have all gone in different directions, but they stayed pretty tight. And I would say it happened to work out that way. They did such a tremendous job, but if you can do something to make sure that they feel supported and that there's really good synergy amongst those 3, it happened organically on this project with the 3 PMs and the business lead. But if that's something you'll want to pay attention to, because if it's not smooth there, it can get really difficult. That's it for the resources. Is there anything?
So just one thing I kind of wanted to add to what Naomi was talking about on the resources side. We really saw the impact of not having fully dedicated resources when we got into UAT. We had planned for our UAT testers, the 10 of them, to dedicate 50% of their time to testing. Their leaders were all on board with that, and we had planned for 10 weeks for UAT. We ended UAT at 26 weeks. So it really impacted us because everybody's busy, work's going ballistic, production takes precedence. And so we really saw that, and just wanted to share that with everybody.
I'm going to shout out Ravi Nair, who is our IT business support right there. Thank you, Ravi, for being an amazing partner. That's something else too, having on the business side, you need those IT partners so that they know who. To me, IT is like a big black box, and they help make sure that you're navigating and you're getting to the right people. So that was super helpful. As far as design standards, if you can tighten these up before, like if you're preparing for AUD or an upgrade, going through your design standards and making sure they're as complete as possible or as up to date as possible is another lessons learned. We were building or changing these as we were going through our build, and that made it a lot more challenging. So that was one of the things. Again, changing the CU library with before we went through the maximal upgrade, it was highly customized to APS. And when we went through the upgrade, there was times when we didn't know what that was going to look like, and we didn't have the big picture because there was things that were changing on their end. So it made it even more difficult. But like I said, we were going through. This is an opportunity to drive standard design and design standards, because now they're not gonna, the tool that we've built for them or that we've brought to them matches our designs and our standards. And so this is an opportunity for sure to make sure that we're standardizing our design. The other thing is, there was one major process that this is a net new system for us, right? This replaces AutoCAD, but there was processes that were touched and procedures that needed to get updated along the way. We set up what we call a CU change review board, where we bring in SMEs from all parts of the company, to from accounting to obviously our IT people, multiple business SMEs, so that as we're going through and changing our compatible units, we're making sure AUD doesn't get left behind. Otherwise, you're going to have designers there with the tool and the standards or construction specs not matching. But making sure you look at map out the processes that you believe are going to change. And it was a little bit difficult for us to do that because this was so new to us. And we did catch some of those early on, but there was others that we missed along the way. So taking time to do that was, looking back, something that we would have done. And resources is probably the biggest thing, making sure that you had those dedicated resources to work on the project. Anything on design standards? We did set up a few different things as far as support post go live, and we set up a SharePoint site. We set up chats, Teams chats. We also have business hours that was set up by our IT partners that we participate in. And what Mark is showing you here is our SharePoint site, where we have frequently questions asked. We've been communicating changes to AUD through what we call designer alerts, and these alerts get sent out through our standards team, and they get sent out via email. The supervisors and the users don't always look at those, and so sometimes they'd ask a question and we're like, yeah, that was communicated to the alert, so we decided to put them in here. You can see support at the top there, and then we have user guides and videos that were created. So these are some of you can see they're in there by category: overhead, underground, and then some of the others. I don't know if you want to click on one of the videos. No, definitely not. Or the text. Maybe we can just show one of them. They're really good. Mark's just...
I appreciate that, but you don't have to lie. Yeah, so I know a lot of people prefer videos over text, so I tried doing every how-to guide with a text or a video guide. Sometimes people have told me to have both open as I do something, and guaranteed, one thing I've learned, they'll still mess it up. I don't know how to get around that, but yeah, so I did a ton of guides, step by step. The hard part with these was that when we're going through user training, I was learning new things. So I might have written a guide on day one, and a month in, I've learned something where I have to go back and update my guides. And that's a constant struggle I have, but constant learning is good. One thing I also tried doing with the SharePoint, the how-tos follow the guide, the life cycle of a design. So you start with setting up AUD, then project initiation, importing your base maps. So a new user can just pretty much follow this from the top down. And by the time they get to the bottom, I've walked through the whole process for them.
All right, so now we'll get into kind of the fun part, we want to show you something that SBS built for us to help us out with the way that we do design work. So what we're looking at here is actually an AutoCAD design. This is how we did design back in the day, before AUD. So we would show our ULS and then would offset every single circuit that was inside that ULS, represented by a single line. That single line could represent one conduit with wire, one conduit without wire, multiple conduits with or without wire. It was all built by circuit. And so each line represented a single circuit, whether that was feeder, primary, secondary, or service. And so as you can see, the design would get really, really cluttered and sometimes really hard to understand. This is kind of a smaller subdivision example here. So if we got into a really big subdivision or in a downtown metropolitan area that was just filled with feeders, these designs could just be a mess and really, really hard to read and follow. So what we did was we started, as we got into AUD, started looking at things because we learned real quickly that AUD doesn't typically work in circuits. And so we kind of started trying to figure out how we were going to do that. And one of the things that we learned was that this no longer worked for us. We had to get away from this. We had to go to something different. So we decided to go to single line design. And so now we're building AUD to show the ULS and use callouts to represent everything else, more in line with industry standard from what we've seen, and a whole lot easier to read and follow and work with. The problem being, this is not how our GIS system is built. This is not how it works. Our GIS needs to see those circuits broken out of the ULS. And so now we're stuck between a rock and a hard place because we're making design better, but our GIS still needs to see it. So here's where we worked with SBS and came in with a single circuit solution for this. So when we worked with the schematic expand tool, you can see on the top here, it breaks out every single conduit. And so this is what we ended up with when we had 3 2-inch conduits on the primary side or 9 4-inch conduits on a service side. This is what it would do for the schematic expand. It didn't do it by circuit. It just broke out every single conduit, which would have just absolutely blown up our GIS because they represent everything by circuit. So several people, a whole lot smarter than me, worked on this and figured out a way to make the circuits work. So they took our trench menu and they broke it down and gave us, for each individual type of wire and conduit that we have, an option to add a count for the conduit and a number of runs for the wire. So we can specify, I need 2 5-inch conduits for the feeder and I'm going to have one of them filled with wire. I can specify that, and when I draw it in, this is how it looks at the bottom of the screen when we do the schematic expand. It's showing 2 5-inch conduits, or well, if this one was showing feeder, represents a single line representing all the conduits and wire that are in that trench or in that circuit. If I had multiple circuits in that trench, I'd have a line for each circuit. So exactly what our GIS needs. Made it easy and simple. It also gives us the ability, they put it right into the attributes and feature info, for us to be able to update. So if something changes in the design where I need to add some more conduits into a specific circuit, I can go into the attributes, make the updates, it automatically does it. Still shows it schematically correct. It really changed the game for us and allowed us to not only meet the needs of our GIS team, but also to be able to meet the needs of our design. Really, really cool tool. It took them quite a bit of time to put this together for us, but really, really fantastic. And I think with that, Mark was going to show kind of a demo of how we do cut-ins utilizing this new single circuit design piece. So we'll kind of talk through that if you want to go ahead and do your demo.
I got time.
Oh,
How are we doing with time, Pat? We good? Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Help us along, Bill. Hey. I know SRP's been asking for a demo for a long time. This is for you, bot.
So wait.
I'm gonna be honest with you. Before this update came out, I was nervous because it looked nothing like APS design. But SBS literally saved the day, like by this one update. So this is our new standard. We have the one segment represents everything in here, and I can click on this segment, and then feature info. You can see here's our 2-inch, and we have 3 conduits there, and here's our conductor in here. As Justin was saying, we can change this on the fly in the feature info, and that changes your updates because those are smart. And he's also mentioning that GIS needs the expanded offsets. So there's a tool here that makes this super simple. Everything in here is just real simple tools. So there's our offset. This is what we used to design. And this is very helpful when it comes to doing cut-ins or a lot of detailed work. You can see which lines you're actually dealing with. So we're going to just do a simple cut-in on this line. I'm going to take this conductor, change the status to removal. Because our crew's going to go pull the wire out, we're going to install a new transformer across the street, and we're going to put a new segment in. And this segment's going to cut into the existing segment. And you see as I did that, AUD is showing you that it's going to break that segment for us. But beyond breaking the segment, we also need to break the conduit to bring our sweeps into it. So what we like to do is draw a circle showing us how far away our sweeps are going to be. And to break that conduit, all we have to do is insert a intermediate structure. And this gives us the ability to break the segment and the conduit at the same time. There's our 2 intermediate structures. I can delete the circle, it's no longer needed. So right now the segments are broken, I still need to break the conduit, and all you have to do to do that, go back to feature info and click on the hard split button. When I teach people this, I try to teach them like, how would the crew build this? How would your contractor build this? You know, they would dig this trench, they'd break the conduit. Then the next thing they do would bring the conduit in this segment and install the sweeps to the existing conduit. So I go to primary, first thing you gotta do is set your defaults, and we're gonna add primary conduit to trench. We can do this one at a time. We could do conduit first, and then we can add primary, or we can do it at the same time. That's the one thing I've learned about AUDs. You're gonna find what way works best for you. It gives you the ability to design as needed. So I just pulled in conduit and conductor shooting to the west, and I gotta do the same thing going to the east. And when you highlight this, you can see, you kind of see right there, there's an actual sweep that AUD is installing for us. So as of right now, we have conduit. There's technically 6 conduits and 6 primary conductors in this trench, all represented by that one line. All we have to do now is connect it to the existing conduit. Again, AUD makes this easy. All I have to do is find that conduit, hit the plus sign, and click on the wire you want to pull through. And you can see right here, I'm hovering over it, and you see the yellow highlight. That means that's the conductor I'm going to pull in to the left. That's the one I want. Everything about this makes it easy. And all I have to do is find the other segment right there. Here's my existing conduit I want to pull the wire through, hit the plus sign, and there's the only conductor I can pick from. It knows based off the proximity of the wire and the conduit that it gives you the only options you can have. So right now, if I wanted to double check, make sure my conductors are pulled, I could again use the schematic edit button, set my offsets, and this is what our GS is going to need. They need to see the removal wire, they need to see the proposed, everything split out. But for our design, we don't need that. Again, there's easy buttons for all this. I hit the collapse button. That's what we need for our designs, and this is what GS needs. And the last thing we need to make sure, connections are important in AUD. So to check connections, they got this highlight button. You click on a device, and nothing's highlighted because connections weren't made. I can go to each wire and make connections as necessary, or they have another easy button called Auto Connect, and you could just highlight your whole drawing. I don't want to connect to the removal. All right. So everything should be connected. And again, instead of clicking on each device going to feature info, all I have to do is click the connect highlight button. Click on a device, and you can see right there, everything's connected. To get the correct CUs, I need to push to Maximo. So that's currently how a cut-in is.
And cut-ins are one of the more complex. Yeah. Yeah. So what he just represented was one of the more complex workflows that we have in our system. And so kind of cutting into an existing trench, we've been working on it for a very long time, but as Mark showed, it's been made easy for us. It can be done.
Yeah, if we didn't make this update, I would have had it done this 3 times for each conduit and conductor. I mean, that cut-in process took me 3 to 5 minutes. That's 15 minutes it would have taken. I've done it in a few minutes. So it is very, like I said, SBS saved the day on that one.
All right. Well, thank you guys. We can open it up to questions.
Hey, I get to ask a question first. I noticed on your pads, it looked like you had the dimensions as part of your block. Do you have that on there? I don't know if you can show that or not. We've been seeing that a lot on the substation side of the house, but this is one of the few I've seen on the distribution. How is that working in your process?
So what we did is part of our standard design process before we even came into AUD was to have a 2-scale block that showed all of our clearances and everything else needed for that equipment to help us place our equipment where it needed to be. With that, we used that to represent our pad. So it gives us the material that we need for the pad. We can set it up as the structure for that device and allows us to connect everything properly.
The circle you were drawing to create the sweeps, do you find that works consistently, like all the time? I thought it was clever.
Honestly, I don't want to use it. He makes me do it. So my side of the business, customer orders sweeps and conduit, so I don't really care about where it breaks. I just need to create the sweeps. But our underground engineering team, they order every piece of conduit. So for them, it makes a lot of sense to be as precise as possible when ordering conduit. So for them, that makes sense. For me, not so much.
Okay, yeah.
But yes, it works.
Sometimes the sweep handler is really tricky, and especially in tight spots, so I was wondering if it really helped to get it just in the right place to get the right radius and whatnot.
Yeah, to kind of help us with that, we have standard radius sweeps for all the sizes of conduits. So if it's a 90, on a 2-inch, it's a 3-foot radius every time. We don't use any other degrees. In our straight runs, if we have to deviate a little bit, we'll use 45s and 22s and all that. But on a hard 90, it's always a standard radius.
Going back to the process of the CU overhaul that you did, and I think I heard you say, Justin, that you oversee design standards. I'm curious to what level those two streams interacted with each other. In other words, the materials that go into a design standard play into CUs. Did you look at those simultaneously, or did you completely, destroy the CU library and rebuild it based on? And then just to add on to that, if you could give me a glimpse, and this is something we can go over later, but do you build a complex CU or a series of individual CUs and then let AUD add on almost Lego block style for the more complicated design standards? I know that's a lot, but...
Yeah, so our CUs are managed by our standards department, which is different than the department that I'm in on, specifically on the design standards side of the house. And so our construction standards group manages the CU catalog. They build and maintain all of our CUs, and they're really the gatekeepers on that. And so they were in charge of redoing the structure. And so we basically just used what they gave us and had to work with. And so we went from a single level CU to a 7-level CU, where we had child CUs and everything else that roll up. And so in AUD, as we're building out our specs, and we had to kind of consider all of that into what material we're ordering. And so we have our base CUs that we use most of the time that are, I believe, a level 5, if I remember correctly, that give us all of our base material and the main things we need. And then there's child CUs that roll up to that based upon what you call out here for your base. And so it's not always one for one, depending upon what the material is and what the needed pieces are, kind of dictated how we built that out and what AUD is looking for.
So some are blocks and some of them are complex. Yeah.
It's
More
a mix.
Yeah.
Great job, guys. We recently went live ourselves. Something that was, communicated to our management from last year's PUG conference. I didn't attend. This is my first year myself, but was having those dedicated resources. So something that kind of a little pushback from our management is hiring contractors to fill that role of dedicated resources instead of internal designers, especially since we have high volume of production work, and designers, skilled designers are hard to come by. It takes a lot of internal training. It takes multiple years to really get someone fully up to speed with design, all the knowledge and different applications we use. So what was a big selling point that you guys, talks maybe you had with management to be able to get those dedicated resources, internal employees? I'm assuming you guys have when you say you have a dedicated team to it. If you have any insights on that, just...
Yeah, I don't think we've successfully sold it yet. We've sold it multiple times and we've got like the green light and then we get a new director and we have to resell it. We're using a combination of contract support and internal SMEs. One of the things, like, we need somebody on our side to be the administrator, to be able to go in and do some configuration. And we can talk during one of the breaks too to kind of show you what we've done. I don't think we have the answer because I can't say we've accomplished it, but we did get word about a week ago that we have approval for an additional headcount to continue with. But it was multiple business cases. It was really showing them what goes into it, right? Like kind of demonstrating the work streams through a flow chart, because a lot of times our management, they know what it means at a high level, but you have to be able to pull up articulate what some of those workflows are beneath the surface. And so I think showing them that with like activities beneath each one of them was something that helped us. But we're not really there. So we'll talk again in a year.
Then are you guys also, your internal employees, are you guys learning the, admin roles as well, like possibly updating roles and configurations, template settings, all that?
So that's what we're kind of doing with Mark and with our other guy, Cody, is we're setting them up as those admin roles and learning that configuration while we're using contract support to help us get through it as they're learning and getting up to speed on things.
Awesome. Then one last question. So with your guys' multiple circuits you were showing before, I'm assuming you guys didn't do a one line. Instead, you did the multiple circuits on your design sketches. Is that correct?
So actually we did both.
You did both.
Back in the day. So we still had what we call the primary ID that was just a not to scale representation of all the new primary and feeder wire that was being installed for our crews to kind of use, while we had the big scale design to go off of also.
So I imagine that was a process for you guys to implement any design changes. Anytime you're changing the look of design, you got to change your standards, your work order guidelines if you have those, and get everyone on board in the company basically that cares about those designs, correct?
Yeah, so to kind of help with that, we have a design standards committee that I work with that has representation from all across T&D that comes into play. And so we use that committee to help us with any changes we needed for AUD for in design specifically, because going to single line design was massive change for our company, because we've done multi-line design for 30 plus years. And so going into that, so we use that committee to help roll out the need, the why, the benefits, and all that. And then they have an alert program that they use to notify the entire design community.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. I'm looking forward to collaborating more.